Christopher, so tell me the story of how you built the Margaret Cleveland.
So it originated for me, really it goes back to the beginning, right? 49 years ago. I grew up gardening with my mom. I grew up seeing Margaret Cleveland and Peggy Cleveland collecting things in their world travels. They lived outside of DC. It was something that I didn't realize was always a passion. That as I got older in my day job, saw the need for bringing it to life. In South Florida, we created, in Fort Lauderdale, the arts district called Fat Village. It was kind of building off of what was happening in Wynwood, and we would feature a different artist in our design studio every month. And every month we would do an art walk. And so there was the different artists that people would come in and they would see how I decorated the studio. As I was mentioning earlier, for me, like we spend more time at work than we do anywhere else. So it was really important that it's a space that's inspiring and that is creative. So as people would come in, they would ask like, where do you get this piece? Or where did you find that piece? And so it kind of like evolved naturally. Like, wow, this is a great opportunity for me to lean into the Margaret Cleveland. So it was, I guess, January of 2014 that I officially like registered and started the Margaret Cleveland. Fast forward, when we moved to Baltimore in 2019, Ryan was like, why don't you actually officially open like a legit store? And so I researched and I found like different locations. However, like it's, as an entrepreneur, like this is a passion project, right? So I found this amazing location by Whole Foods. They wanted $7,000 a month. So just to break even, it was going to be $14,000. That's not passion. That's another day job. And so the world shut down and I would bike ride through Baltimore. I rode 5,000 miles.
This is during COVID?
During COVID.
Okay.
So 2021, I got back into biking, rode 5,000 miles. And so through that, I would basically take addresses and research later to see, hey, is this property for sale? Found a property in Bolton Hill. The secretary happened to be coming in. And I was like, is this building for sale? And she was like, no, but here's the owner's number. I called him. They were like, we'd actually sell. So that was the start of the Margaret Cleveland in Baltimore. So it was our design studio in the back. So it was similar to Fort Lauderdale. It took me a year to get that property open through zoning and everything. 3 months after opening that, Brad, who also moved up from South Florida, was the listing agent for Walther Gardens. He's like, I have what you really wanted. I drove over there, never heard of Walther Gardens, walking through the property. It's a full acre. And I was like, this is exactly what I envisioned. But there's no way I could take this on. So I called Ryan and he came over and he was like, this is exactly what you've always wanted. And I want nothing to do with it. He's like, I'm gonna stay over at Bolton Hill. We closed on that March 23rd of 23. I had 7 weeks to transform that property, anchoring it to Mother's Day. So I wanted to open on Mother's Day to honor my mom, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, Margaret Cleveland being who the store is named after. And it was magic. I mean, it was the hardest, most enriching, most rewarding 7 weeks of my life. I mean, I was on top of roofs, I was planting gardens, I was transforming spaces. So that's really how it came in its present form, it came to be.
So along with the Margaret Cleveland, you are also a designer, right? So how is it like balancing being a creative, but also being a business owner? Because I've met a lot of creatives who are business owners and they tend to struggle on the operational side.
There's a woman who we refer to each other as twins. I had never heard this, but she said that there's 1%ers of people who have equal balance of the business side and artist. Because at the end of the day, like as an artist, like I've enjoyed creating things since I was a kid. And you always hear about the starving artist. I never wanted to be a starving artist. And I thought that all of us had this ability. And then I came to realize that it isn't, like it is unique. So with that, I think leveraging that, I guess, ability to not only create spaces, to imagine things, but also recognize that it has to execute from a business side, from a financial side. Otherwise, you're just creating, and there's no way to monetize it. So in everything I've done, I've found a way, no different than my first Airbnb. When Ryan was like, hey, I would love to have a second house in Pennsylvania so we can bring the kids, it was like, okay, I don't want to pay for a second house. How do I monetize it? How do I create a business around it that I can then be creative and, not just pay for it, in the sense that it's, it can pay for itself.
You mentioned, you used the word, it's almost like an ability you have. What would you say makes up that ability?
So I think kind of like what we were talking about, it is in every entrepreneur that I've met, there's something that happened in their childhood. For me, it was the death of my father 2 weeks after my third birthday. And as a result, my mother clearly said to the Clevelands and her side of the family, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to, she was 19. And I think for me, what that showed is the ability to make it work and the ability to do whatever it takes. Whether that's a part of that, I think for me as an artist, my dad was an artist as well. It was finding a way of, yes, continuing to do what you love and like leveraging the business side in equal parts. It's hard because sometimes, like with my core business, people are always making decisions based on return on investment and based on budgets I don't operate in budgets. I operate on, yes, this needs to monetize. It needs to pay for itself. And I also want to make sure that I'm creating a space that is really, really unique and experiential. Because I also know that if I do this really well, this is going to come naturally. Not that I didn't make a spreadsheet for, the shop. It was like, hey, like this is, I'm going to be a creative in making this look amazing without spending a lot of money, right? Like, and I think that's the art of being a creative is you can create magic from little, right? I mean, that's what every art district has ever been is creatives really showing up and doing what they're passionate about with little, right? And I think that's the balance of a business-minded also artist. I think for me, sometimes I struggle because these things take a lot more time. And so these things are oftentimes what I'm...
The creative things?
The business
things.
Like all the setup and all, like to get something to run successfully, there's a lot of things you have to put in place. The art side is what I feel like I'm always jumping in at the end, right? And that's also kind of like from an artistic standpoint, also, it's kind of a fun challenge too. The original shop in Bolton Hill, I had to get Shopify set up. I had to teach myself Shopify. I had to get everything in. I had to get everything delivered and set. The time that I had left to actually get the store merchandise was a fraction, right? Like Walther Gardens, our floor in the farmhouse was supposed to be finished drying 2 weeks before. It was still wet the evening before opening, and the film crew were coming. The news was coming the next day, and I was like, look, I don't care. It's damp, it's wet. We need to put rugs down. I need to bring the furniture in. Like, I need to set. And literally, it was 8 p.m. the night before opening that I was finally getting furniture in and starting to merchandise. I've realized all of us as entrepreneurs, again, it goes back to having this ability to just make it work. And sometimes it means really long hours. And sometimes that's when that magic really comes out.
You mentioned something earlier about how all of the great entrepreneurs, they have this experience that happened to them that's almost like trauma, right? That makes them a little bit different. But what I've also realized in addition to that is that they had this negative experience, but they also had something, let's say, positive or something that became a motivator for them. And based on our conversations, I feel like for you, that was your mom.
For sure. It was my mom, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother. And I think for me, and my brother's an entrepreneur too. He's amazingly successful as well. And I think what we both learned is, as somebody who was pregnant at 15, had a child at 16, and then lost your husband at 19 and had 2 kids, a newborn and a just turned 3-year-old. She had 2 choices. I mean, multiple choices, but 2 key choices. She wasn't going to take the road of like, woe is me, look what happened to me, this is awful. We saw that. We saw her ability to say, you know what, like, I don't want that road. Like, I'm going to make the most of whatever I can. Mm-hmm. And I think in seeing that, I mean, that's how successful entrepreneurs that have experienced these things, I think that's what we end up doing. I jokingly call it the art of the pivot, right? It's like, no matter what happens, there's always a solution, mm-hmm. And it's using your creative mind to think outside of the box that we're usually put in and say, look, this is the challenge. How do we continue to get to where we want to go? And then creatively, like using the artistic mind to say, what's the quickest means, what's the best way to get there?
So where is it that you are looking to go? What are you trying to build?
It's always evolving. And I would say really at its core, somebody asked me recently, with Helium Creative being 22 years, they're like, what's next, right? And what I love about Helium is it gives me, at the end of the day, we need money, right? Mm-hmm. We need money to survive, like we've got our mortgages and everything. It also allows me to create other experiences, right? Whether it's the shop and creating something that this region does not have. Helium Inspires is my nonprofit that brings art back to classrooms or to students who no longer have art classes. All of the threads of what I've wanted to do since I was a little kid I'm able to do as a result of Helium Creative. And I think for me, it's just continuing to take the success of that and what I've created, and how do I impact people and create more experiences. Because at the end of the day, like, the kids are set up, right? Like, I've done all that I need to do to get them set up. And so for me, it's like, I don't want to die with having money in the bank and dying doesn't motivate me, right? Like creating spaces and things that inspire others and allow us to think outside of what we normally, like the normal context, is what brings joy for me.
So you want your legacy to be known as an individual who created spaces and inspired others to also create spaces.
I want to create magic, right? Like, I want people, when you came to the shop, I want people to walk into the environment, whether it's a garden, whether it's whatever, an Airbnb. I want you to feel something. I want you to, professionally, what I always say is I want to evoke emotion and feeling. Because at the end of the day, we are in an environment that's so inundated with convenience, right? Like, you can go to the big box store, you can go on Amazon. We've stripped away social media. It's all stripped us away from authentically connecting to people. I want to help in my way impact a difference, right? Like, it doesn't have to be sterile. It doesn't have to be we are all living behind a screen or behind an environment of convenience and not allowing nature or the environment or spaces, like that. The third space is really crucial, to us as a people. And for me, like, if I can share what's in here that I've looked at, whether it's from an architectural standpoint of like being inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright or Claude Monet, or like any of the people or the spaces that have influenced me, if I can create something that is a culmination of that and invite people to experience it, that's amazing for me.
I mean, I've honestly even noticed what you mentioned about the social media side of things and how there aren't very many third spaces now, and even the spaces that are being created, they're being stripped of emotion.
Yeah.
Right? They're very bland.
Yeah.
Everything being designed now, the modern way of designing is very bland, very boring, it lacks color.
Yeah.
And what you're looking to build through the Margaret Cleveland and much of your other ventures, I think is the opposite of that.
It goes back to why big box or Amazon, at the end of the day, all of these businesses are run by an executive sitting behind a desk and looking at a return on investment. They're looking at a spreadsheet. They're not looking at how is this impacting somebody. And if you're looking at it from a dollars and cents side, you're missing the big picture, right? Like the property that the Margaret Cleveland currently is an 1885 farmhouse. That family had an apple orchard and a farm. They created a nursery, and then they created the oldest snowball stand in the country 104 years ago to market their business. When you would have gone there, you would connect with a family. You would connect with real people, right? And I think what's happened today from like my day job is, yes, we're creating third spaces and real estate developments. Like I love Hudson Yards. I love what the High Line is. And kind of like Harbor Place, when I was a kid, Harbor Place transformed the way that cities looked at a dying center core. And once anybody sees it, I call it the burger effect. Once somebody sees something is successful, all they do is rinse and repeat, right? Like how many, you see Target, you see, Chick-fil-A, like it's like, no matter what city you're gonna go to, it's like copy, paste, copy, paste. It's inauthentic. For me, it is how do we create something that is real, that is something that somebody wants to connect with? Like at the store, for example, like, I say to the team, like, I want people to come and sit. They want to sketch. They want to just stroll. Whatever it is that they're gaining from the space, that's why it's there. It's not for me, it's for us, right? It's for Baltimore. It's for Maryland. It is, it's something bigger than any one of us. Is my goal in whatever I'm doing. Whether it's with Helium Creative or the Margaret Cleveland, I'm just a facilitator, right, to create.
So ultimately, the goal would be to impact as many people as possible.
Yeah.
Right. And let's say, for example, at Amazon, they impact an insane amount of people, whether you view that impact as positive or negative.
Yeah.
But my question to that is it possible to take the route of focusing on the experience rather than the numbers and still impact a large amount of people?
I totally believe so. It is shifting the mindset. If we look historically, prior to executives making decisions, the world was surviving, right? Like you look back at Europe, they're able to still operate without the mode that we've. I'll use the example of the oldest snowball stand in the country. Like, right, this is the bonus business. When I bought Balther Gardens, it is part of the property. I've never had a snowball. Probably shouldn't say that. And it was like, if I'm going to own the oldest snowball stand in the country, I have to figure out what made this special. And what made it special was it was syrups that Mrs. Sins made from scratch in the farmhouse kitchen, using real ingredients, real sugar. It was authentic. She created egg custard, which is the Baltimore classic flavor, in that farmhouse. So for me, what I recognized when I first opened the snowball stand is cold kiss in like the 60s, 70s, 80s for convenience, cost savings, created artificial flavors using artificial everything. There's nothing real there, right? But people could make the dollars make sense. I got rid of all. And for me, what I've created just in that, people are experiencing flavors that are real, that you can taste the mojito, you can taste the strawberry rose. I'm a firm believer that it's a risk in the sense of the executive, right? Because all they want to see, they want you to show them the spreadsheet. Professionally, I say I can't show you a spreadsheet. What I can tell you is if you cut the corners there's a loss. You only have one opportunity to make a first right impression. And if you can evoke emotion and feeling, you've connected with somebody. They want to come back. That's free marketing, right? Like that's, you left the shop. I'm sure you talked to somebody about it. I don't advertise what I do. For me, what I do is I invest me into it and let it speak for itself. You know, let people who have felt what they feel of it be the voice for it.
That's amazing. I want to speak a little bit more about your time in Florida. So in Florida, you were a big designer. Can you talk to me a little bit more about how your time in Florida impacted who you are now, and also is shaping how you're currently building a business? Because when we spoke previously about it, you mentioned that your time in Florida essentially taught you what not to do when building a business.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I guess to back up a bit, so I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. My dad's side was Mennonite. I went to school in Philadelphia because I wanted to get to the big city. Ultimately, I wanted to get to the bigger city of New York. Ended up in Fort Lauderdale for the .com. When that crashed, worked for another agency, and that is what taught me what not to do. You know, and as an entrepreneur, that's why I started Helium 22 years ago, because it was like there's what was being offered, what I recognized, and I guess it's kind of like what we're talking about with the big box today, is I would see the president, the creative directors going to these meetings and pitching the world and not delivering. And not only not delivering, but not being a part of it. You know, they would go back to the office, they've already had their signed contract, and they would put the junior designer or an intern on it, and they would only step back in when something went sideways. To me, like, that's not authentic. That's not, you know, really driving passion. And so as a result, when I started Helium, it was like, no, like I want to create something that is real, you know, and do it not only from a lens of, yes, as an artist, but also like strategically, how do I use how my mind operates to also look at the strategy and business like combined that allows it to be something that is not what a typical agency is going to give you, right? Because, you know, there's a lot of amazing advertising agencies, branding agencies that put out great design. For me, there's few that operate the way that I do, in the sense that, you know, especially when I'm doing luxury real estate, I wanted to be an architect, right? I'm an artist. Like I'm combining all these things strategically that allow for something very unique. So in that sense, as much as I want to go to New York, I'm so grateful I ended up in South Florida. My 20 years in South Florida, when I moved to South Florida, it was 1999. Miami and South Florida. Miami didn't even have a single residence downtown. My career, I got to watch and support a lot of those real estate buildings being built. And so in that, like I got to see not only how Miami grew, but how that spilled into Fort Lauderdale. And through speaking to my clients and doing our discovery sessions, it allowed me to really recognize what works and doesn't work in how they were, kind of the challenges that they had. And so that was always like being filed away, not realizing it, that I'm able to use not only for my clients, but also in opening the Margaret Cleveland. You know, like there was a lot of challenges that they experienced that I was able to avoid. Not that I avoid all of them, right? Like, I mean, every day there's something. But I think going back to the art of the pivot, it's like, what do you do? How do you fix it, right? Like when we opened up the snowball stand 2 weeks ago, there was a massive leak under. It's like, okay, what do you do? You know, for me, getting stressed and worrying isn't going to change anything, right? And I think, you know, for me also, people often ask, they're like, how do you do all the things, you know, between running multiple businesses and having twins that are 9? What I learned in South Florida in my 20 years, I mean, they were pivotal 20 years, is I can't control all aspects of all the things that I'm doing. And if I let go, you know, sometimes people are like, oh, I need to think through all the things that could happen. I would lose my mind. right? And if I'm worrying about all the things that could happen in all the things that I'm doing, as soon as something that happens that I didn't think of, what have I done? Right? So for me, it's like, no, like when something arises, I'll address it. And I know I have enough experience, whether it's from South Florida or whether it's from school in Philly or, just what I do, that'll make it work and it'll be okay, and those challenges are what expand us and allow us to further our capacity of what we thought we could do. Like the easy work isn't where we grow.
How do you deal with the constant going and the constant pressure of owning a business? Because when you own a business, it's almost like every single day you have to put out a fire. Every single day something pops up. Every single day something breaks you have to fix. How do you deal with that?
I think similar to what, for me, it is not worrying.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like on the way here, the supplier for the snowball stand, we get this very specific 10-pound block of ice. The two team members were going to where we traditionally got it. They're out of ice. They don't know when we're going to get it. We have 15 blocks left. They were stressed. I was like, what options do we have? And, I gave some suggestions and it resolved itself, right? I think it's not worrying. It's knowing that there's always a solution. And I think that goes back to what I learned from watching my mom.
I would say that I think the average person would hear that statement, it's about not worrying, and think through, how can I not worry?
Well, yes. I think when you have so much, right, between Helium Creative, 2 Airbnbs, 2 commercial properties, twins that are 9, and a store and a snowball stand, and a life, when I spoke to you this morning, I was doing a bike ride. I think at some point you have to let go. And I think if to put a phrase on it, that's what my mom had to do, right? She had to let go. That's what I have to do. And I think that's the secret, right? Is to let go. I can't control, none of us control every aspect of everything that's going to happen. Barb, who she's become my rock star at the shop. She knew nothing about retail. And she came in with a lot of anxiety about all the what ifs and what she now jokes. She's like, Chris, she was like, you always tell me, she's like, it's going to be okay, right? It's the art of the pivot. Expect the unexpected. When you can do that, I think we find peace. Peace in the sense that it's, I can't control it, right? And if you look at the lens of what's around us, from a frame of it's out of my control, I think it brings self-peace and an ability to know that it will be okay. It may not always go as you like. There's always an outcome that we can choose. No different than going back to my mom. She had the ability to focus on the negative and what happened and what was me. Or she had the ability of saying, you know what, this is what I want for me and my family. And in that, it gives us strength and reassurance of it's always going to be okay. And like I said, for me, my best moments are when it doesn't go right, because that's where I'm learning, right? And as much as I'll be 50 next year, the kids ask me all the time, when do you stop learning, Dad? And I say never. If I believe that I stop learning, is when I've given up. We're always growing, in my opinion.
So the key to the anxiety that comes with owning a business is letting go of the outcome.
Letting go. Absolutely. Letting go and recognizing that oftentimes what we think it's going to be is what our ego is saying. And when we step back and say, you know what, whether it's me or the people around me or the outcome that's supposed to be, it's free.
I had a mentor last year, and he told me actually the exact same thing. He said, funny enough, he said, when I started my business, I used to care so much about the outcome, and I would say, okay, I want to make X amount, or I want to have this amount of impact.
Yeah.
And he would clinch onto that so much.
Mm-hmm.
But he said that once you let go of being so attached to the result and focus more on the process and the refinement, the results just came to him.
I couldn't agree more. And I think to add a layer, because then you're in your flow, right? Like you're in the natural space in which that's the goal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to continue to do what I need to do to get there. And it isn't getting us stuck, right? Like if I worried about all the what ifs, I literally would be sitting in that corner in a straitjacket, just being like, it's just not, it's not possible, and it's freeing to know that it's a choice. It is a choice of what we focus on, and the ability to kind of step out and free our mind of that, because it's at the end of the day, as a father, and I know you with your
Yeah.
that's what means everything, right? And so whatever it is that I do, my main focus is my kids, and family. I don't have time or space or energy to devote to things that are out of my control, to the extent that I can, right? Until it's here, and then I can say, okay, this is the circumstance that's presented. I still know where I want to go, and how do I need to get there?
You mentioned earlier that last year, in terms of business, was the most difficult, but also one of the best years.
Oh, 2014.
2014.
So my 10th year.
2014.
It was the best in the end, the hardest during it. So Helium Creative was celebrating 10 years. And I think that's, as an entrepreneur, it's a monumental feat, right? And so we were relaunching our website. We were, we did this huge event where we invited, everyone from Art Walk and Fat Village. I mean, it was a really, the energy was amazing. It was like, oh my gosh, this is a celebration. And what ended up happening is everything kind of turned sideways. Helium, as a result of, at the time, my thinking that I needed to keep pushing without having a temperature gauge of yes, all of us entrepreneurs, if we put our sights on something, we can make it happen. What I learned in 2014 is we also need to recognize that if the timing isn't right, we're going to step through what we thought we needed to do right now and realize, I'm not ready for this. I don't have the experience. Whatever it was, there's a reason that we were being kind of pushed to stop. That's what I learned in 2014. So I went from thinking I was going to have the best in the sense of great success and celebration. I was at the place where I was just, it's done, right? The business is, I need to just pack it up, and I'm going to go be a bag boy, right? Fast forward as the year continued to progress, I was looking at solutions of ways to get out and to make it work. It was literally New Year's Eve. And what was a solution, I was no, this doesn't feel right. And Ryan and I went to dinner, and he was a bit what are we gonna do? And I was we're gonna make it work. Tomorrow's a new year, 2015. And so in that, I was okay, this is what I want. I want us to, to be known as the go-to for luxury real estate, known as the go-to for hospitality. And I reset what my path was. That next year, 2015, we bought our studio on Fort Lauderdale Beach. It all set in motion, right? And the reason I bought the studio was because in moving to Fat Village, yes, we helped create this space. We turned what was a warehouse district, like every artist does, transformed into something magical. And then people saw the opportunity to buy it, and it became more valuable. And so when I approached the owner of the business of building we were in, he was like, yeah, it's going to be like millions of dollars. I was like, okay, I'm going to learn from that, right? Like my business side is going to say, I will never be in a position that I'm paying rent and creating a space that you're going to profit from. So we moved out of there. And so 2015, kind of like the reset year, I was like, okay, like we're gonna build from our own. And so as much as 2014 I thought was gonna be my best, it ended up being the best, but not from the perspective of what I thought. It was really, that's where I learned to really let go and know that all of these things, life around us, is out of our control. It took me literally hitting rock bottom to recognize that I have to let it go. And when you let go is when, like we were saying, like you're in the flow, you're in the space of seeing opportunities and saying yes. Otherwise you're just kind of pivoting, and not pivoting, you're ping-ponging back and forth from like, oh my gosh, I get it. This is a worry, this is a worry, this is a worry. Versus saying, no, like, that's where I'm going.
Something that I've been thinking about myself is a trait that I have that I feel might be holding me back from moving forward or achieving the success that I want or getting what I want out of life, right? On your end, do you think you have any traits, or you had any traits that you feel like has held you back in life?
What transpired in 2014, I would say did, in the sense that as a result of my childhood experience, there was a lot of pressure that I put on myself that I had to figure it out, right? Like if I didn't know it, I had to learn it. If I didn't do it. And I also felt like a lot of this was on me. And so like I would do more than what was humanly possible myself, because that's just how I learned to operate. As a result of the crash, I recognized that no, it's not physically possible. And I had to step back and say, you know what, like, not that I didn't utilize the team, but like I had to let go of more of.
So you were taking on a lot of the responsibilities. Was it because you felt, only I can do it at the level that I want, or was it something else?
I think for me, when my dad died, I think there was an abandonment, right? Mm-hmm. And I felt self-responsible. So when I got older, it wasn't necessarily that I didn't trust. I think it was more of, it wasn't even like, there were things that I just wouldn't even ask, right? Like there were things that I would ask of like, hey, like I need this, this, and this. And then there were just things that it was like, it felt like, oh, like this is just what my role is, right? Mm-hmm. And it was like, and so because I've always done that, I didn't recognize how it was not sustainable until the crash. And then when I stepped back, I was like, my life was completely unmanageable. Not because I don't have support, not because I'm not asking for help, but it was like the amount that I was holding wasn't sustainable. And that was kind of a significant piece of like letting go, right? And recognizing that I don't need to feel that I have to hold all this. And that's why, like, when we were talking in opening up the shop, I intentionally flew to other shop owners and was like, hey, like, I want to create my network. Helium was me for the first 7 years. Mm-hmm. I don't want to slow learn what I want in my passion project. So I intentionally went and spoke to people that I respect. It's like, what is it that makes you tick? What is it that, like, why are you doing this? And in that, like, I've created an incredible network community of like-minded home and garden business shops that we still have. I did that post 2014 at Helium Creative, and I was like, from the onset, I was like, I have to do that for the shop. So,
how are you able to move past that? How are you able to to move past the ability to not let go? Or how were you able to make that adjustment?
I had to crash. You know, there's a saying of like, you have to hit rock bottom. Like I feel like that's true, right? Because circumstances out of our control, right? Like we are born a certain way, right? Like I was inspired by Frank Lloyd Wright. I loved Fort Lauderdale. Like I would go to the farm and sketch. That's who we innately are. And then our environment starts adjusting, right? And like, so life continues to add these other pressures. I needed my crash. I needed my, which is interesting now saying that, because in my career, I started in 1999. There's been significant crashes in the world, the .com crash, the real estate crash, the 2020, like we need those. People need those. Our society needs those to reset, because it's a reminder of, is this working? Was this working for me? Is this working for us? It wasn't working for me. And if it wasn't for what I thought was going to be my best year for other reasons, I still would have kept operating that way. My crash, my recognizing that this isn't sustainable, it's not working for me, was what I needed to say, okay, like I have to pivot. I have to operate differently, because this isn't working. But I needed to crash to really recognize that.
Do you think that's how most people should come to that realization?
I think everyone should crash?
Yeah. I mean, like let's say, for example, someone has something they feel is holding them back. How would you advise them to make those adjustments in their life? Would you say, hey, you need to crash? Or would you say, hey, maybe you could do it in this way, or that way?
I go bike riding, or I get into nature, or I do these things because what I've recognized is we need a balanced life. When I'm in that space, I'm able to recognize where I'm still offsetting. And I say that because I don't believe everyone needs to crash. I think we all have different levels. But it's when we can get back to true self, or like where we started, right? Like where me as a kid was. However we get there, whether it's a crash or it's just getting back to like the things that we love, getting back to authentic self is what we need. For me, it unfortunately took an extreme event, to recognize that. I don't think we all need that, but it does happen a lot, and I think sometimes that's what we or our society or the world sometimes needs. I mean, I think it's you look at climate change, you look at all there's we always go from one to the other. I think on both sides there's growth and there's opportunity. Looking back,
What advice would you give yourself? Let's say you're looking back at the individual who is just starting off, who's just getting into design. What advice would you give yourself?
So as a 49-year-old, I started working when I was 13. If I was gonna give advice.
Was that by choice or was it by circumstance?
By choice.
Okay.
So, my mom did everything that she could. For me, I had big aspirations, and it was very clear that it was, hey, like you can be whatever. And for me, it was like I started working so that I could start creating, and build a life that I was envisioning, and so that meant, kind of not starting from scratch, but kind of starting from scratch, like, hey, like I need to build experience, I need to build, I need money, like kind of continued from there. But that's also where my entrepreneurial spirit came in, I found ways of connecting. Like once it was in that, it was like, oh, like I could see other opportunities. If I were to give myself advice as a 49-year-old to my 13-year-old, I would say as much as you can, follow what's true to you. And as much as I say that, I also hesitate, right? Because, what I've been communicating is my growth is when I've gone off from what was. And yes, like I'm still today trying to get back to where I started. Everything good and bad has shaped me, right? But I would say in that journey, the more that I could have stayed as true to that, I think probably maybe would have helped along the way. Although, now that I'm saying that, like I've been authentic, I've been true to self. I think just knowing that it's always going to be okay, right? And it took some hard things, like 2014, for me to really believe in that, to be able to do that.
What advice would you give to someone who needs that belief? Because I feel that entrepreneurship is a lot of it depends on belief and your faith, essentially, and if this is going to work out or not. All right, so how do you build that belief? Is that something that someone just has, or is that something that you can build?
So as I've met all these other entrepreneurs, I've been curious if it's something that can be learned, or if it's something that has to be in you. I guess to kind of liken it to something else, when I need a team member for whatever the business is, I don't look at resumes. I want to meet you. I want to connect with you authentically, because I can put anything in a resume. My first employee, my first assistant, knew nothing about the business, nothing about Helium. But what he showed me, I can't teach. So that's where, like, I've been curious myself, like, is successful business ownership as an entrepreneur, is it something that can be learned, or is it something that is within inside of us that is out of our control, right? Like I think the trauma or whatever significance happens signals in us a survival, right? Like it is like fight or flight, right? Like, hey, like I'm gonna make this work, right? Like we were joking, like a nuclear bomb hits, like I'm not gonna fix that, but I will be okay, right? And I don't know if that's, I guess to an extent we all possess that, right? I think because of our experiences, we do it to a different level. We do it from a survival standpoint almost. So I would say with that though, we can learn anything, right? Like when I do teach people about creativity and art, people will say I'm not creative or I'm not an artist. And I'll liken, let's say they're a mom. Like, okay, so that schedule that you have, like you finish work and then you've got to get dinner and to soccer, and it's like, that's being creative, right? It's just not, you might not be drawing, but that's using your creative mind. There is always an ability to learn, if you flex that muscle. I've just always been curious if, like, to the degree that crazy entrepreneurs do, like if that's something that you can learn, or if it's something that's just within.
Have you landed on an answer, or is it still up in the air?
I would say it's still up in the air.
Okay. I
think for me, what I've enjoyed in meeting other business owners, whether it's linked to the agency or linked to the store, and I didn't set out to do it, but I recognized like the connection, and every successful business owner that I've met, it's a survival mechanism that has made them, right? Because I think we as a people, there's some people who are like, like going back to my mom, she had a choice of kind of just stopping, and taking an easier route. We have a choice of taking an easy path or a harder path. We all look at the success of Apple, right? Like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. Like there's a fire within these people, right? That is beyond what most people are. And, I also, like, as somebody who has 9-year-old twins, when it was last 4th of July, my mom came down to the house and she was like, Chris, she's like, I don't know how you and your brother do all that you do. And I looked at her, and it was the first time I expressed this to her. I was like, coming from you. She's like, what do you mean? And I was like, you were 19. You were a single mom. You had really nothing. You're starting over. I was like, we learned this from you. And for me, what I pointed to was our children. And I was like, they're getting what I learned, what you learned, they're getting it without the trauma. And for me, like, I think it's interesting to see like how like that, like what I've experienced, what she experienced, what I experienced, and not what they're experiencing, how that shapes them. Because for me, as a father of twins, I recognize that our system is set up in a way to, when you're looking at schooling, kind of not break people down, but like get them to be great employees. Mm-hmm. And in that, it's kind of strips away a lot of the outside of the box thinking, and I guess for all of us is how do we say that yes, like there are day-to-day things that we have to do, but how do we always make sure that we're allowing ourselves to think outside of what is the typical norm, because that's, for me, where the magic is, right? Like that's where the opportunity is, that's where the thought that is unique happens, right? Because like we've kind of been taught like this is how you're supposed to think, this is how you're supposed to gotta, and so I guess in saying that, to answer your question, I think it is something that we can obtain and all benefit from, provided we give ourselves space to think freely outside of the confines of where we're supposed to be.
Nice. It's been a great conversation.
Likewise.
Thank you for your time.
I appreciate it.